The Day the World Changed by Teel James Glenn. I have lived long enough. My way of life has fallen into the sear, the yellow leaf, and that which should accompany old age, as honor, love, obedience, troops of friends, I must not look to have, but in their stead, curses, not loud, but deep mouth honor, breath, which the poor heart would fain deny and dare not. William Shakespeare, Macbeth, Act 5, Scene 3. Esther Howard was not long for the world. Her son Bob had known it before the nurse's pronouncement. Mrs. Green said Mama was going to die soon. There would be no doubt about it. She would not wake from her coma. Mama looked like she was in a deep sleep, so frail, her breath so shallow that her chest did not appear to move unless one looked intensely at it. Bob had bought a plot of land in a cemetery for the family the day before, so he would have a certainty of a place. It seemed important somehow, with all the rest going on, that Bob knew where she would rest, and he would rest beside her. As sick as she had always been there for Bob, with stories of their family in old Ireland crossing the United States as pioneers. She'd been the only flower in the dusty dirt of Cross Plains, Texas. It was she who had introduced him to poetry and literature. She had instilled such a love of reading in Bob that he used to sneak into the closed library, take a book or two to read, then return them when done. He was sure the librarians knew, but they never said anything. It was she that showed him through those books that there was something beyond the dusty horizon. It was in books he found a way out of the grime and ignorance of Cross Plains. It was in his writing stories that he realized he could escape the death and decay, and even triumph over it. Yet the shadow of death had always been there. Mama Howard had been dying for as long as Bob could remember. His father, a country doctor, with no bedside manner and little love for his profession that worked him hard and kept him poor, could do nothing to prevent it. Bob had seen the procession of oil field workers, bullies, roustabouts, and drunkards that populated the day-to-day reality of the town pass through his father's office. He'd even accompanied his father to the sites of shootouts and stabbings and watched, slack-jawed, as Dr. Howard ministered, oft-times futilely, to the wounded. He'd said many men passed to the great beyond. Now his mama was going, and he would be alone in the dying, dirty boomtown. That was why Bob had borrowed the old .38 caliber revolver from his friend, Lindsay Tyson. Now he sat in the battered old Ford in the driveway to the hospital, working up the courage to use the gun on himself. It was not that he feared death. He knew death. All his life he had been his constant companion. No, it was that he feared life, a life of endless, drab days, each blending into the next. He looked out of the car window at the dusty street. He'd seen that street for most of his life, that same street. It was not the market in Samarkand, the steppes of Russia, the field of Agincourt, nor the plains of Aquilonia, yet on that street he had seen them all. The men who walked the main street in Cross Plains were the same as those of ages gone, yet to Bob Howard they were aliens. They had been. He had not. He'd not left 100 miles from his birthplace his entire life, except in books. Then at 15, he'd bought an issue of Adventure magazine, and he knew he wanted to be a writer for it. Words had been his passport and his hope. If only the magazines paid more, if only the magazines paid on time, if only. He could not live on if only. Without Hester Howard's kind words, her quotes from poetry and tales of the family history, the words in the books were empty. And the empty space inside of Bob was suddenly more vast. He hefted the gun. It was very heavy in his meaty hand and so very cold. An odd thought pleaded across his poetic mind. Wish it was Grandpa's gun. It would have seemed somehow fitting if he'd used that old gun, but restoring it was one of those things he'd not gotten around to. Time. It's always about time. There was never enough. He thought about all the time he'd sat alone in the room writing for the pulp magazines, all the time he'd not walked across the London Bridge, all the times he had not crossed the Bosphorus, all the times he had not lived himself, but given life to paper heroes. Tears blurred his vision. Now Hester was close or gone, and there was no hope. No one to joy in his triumphs. The other woman that had been in his life, Novaline, who had listened to him and delighted in his visions of ages past, was gone as well. Not to the great dark, but still beyond his reach. A destiny not his. Alone. Time. Time alone. The thought of both was almost overwhelming. Time is a phantom built by the mind of man. He remembered one of his own poems. He remembered all his poems and more. His stories and his letters to his friend Howie Lovecraft. The only chance he had to connect mind to mind with others, all of them so far away. The gun in his hand began to shake. "I'm sorry, Mama," he said aloud, then quoted again. "I saw the temples topple, till I saw the idols reel, till my brain had turned to iron, and my heart had turned to steel." He cocked the hammer to put the barrel of the gun against his temple. "For my road runs out in thistles, and my dreams have turned to dust." His finger touched the trigger, lightly like a mother kiss on a baby's eyes. "I'm sorry, Howie." He thought again of all the crimson tales he'd written, all his letters to his friend Howie Lovecraft, where he'd extolled the virtues of the natural man, the barbarian. Men who lived each minute, fire in their veins, and never a doubt in their minds but that life was the choice. How it was inevitable that such men would triumph over the constructs and artificiality of modern man. Howie always argued for civilization. "Heathens had no time to doubt," Bob or Buckley said aloud. The barrel of the gun was cold against his head. "I can't doubt," he said in too loud a voice. "I ain't no civilized man, despite what Mama tried to make me." The tears all but blurred the windshield of the car so he could not see the hospital anymore. "I ain't nothing like a civilized man, despite what Howie says." His finger refused to tighten on the trigger. He remembered a poem he'd read to Novaline. "I will rise some day when the day is done and the stars begin to quiver. I will follow the road of the setting sun till I come to a dreaming river." He had to find that dreaming river. He saw all the panoply of kings and armies, the roar of battle, the cries of grim grey warriors who faced death with life, who squeezed each moment of life from the bloody grip of their enemies. And he uncocked the hammer. "Only a civilized man would moan and gripe about a human passing," he said aloud. "Barbarians always choose to live completely till they die and savor every minute." He wiped his tears and put the gun in the glove compartment before slipping from the car to go sit by his unconscious mother, promising her he would find a way to honor her faith in him and see the world. Then he read a poem aloud to her quietly until she passed to the great beyond. And so on that day, June 11th, 1936, in some other reality, the world changed, and Robert Irvin Howard went on to adventure across the world. That's a short story by Teel James Glenn, which appears in Fight Card Bare-Knuckle Barbarian, and is also going to be the first in a series of Robert E. Howard adventures from Pro Se. Thank you for listening, and stay safe.